What if I told you that the very thing that seems to destroy you could become the foundation of your greatest triumph? What if the door that life slams shut in your face isn't meant to keep you out, but to teach you that you have the power to open it again and again until you find what lies beyond? Today I'm going to share with you a story that will fundamentally change how you view failure, rejection, and the seemingly impossible obstacles in your life. This is the story of Thomas Hartwell, a farmer from rural Nebraska, whose journey from devastating loss to miraculous abundance proves that when life shuts a door, you don't just knock, you open it again, because that's exactly how doors work. I promise you, if you listen to this story up to the end, you will uncover 5 strong keys to reopen your door for success, even after its closure. Before we dive into this life-changing story, if you're someone who needs a reminder that your current struggles are not your final destination, that your dreams are worth fighting for, and that resilience isn't just a word but a way of life, then hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments what Dr. Life has shut in your face that you're ready to open again. In the heart of Nebraska, where the horizon stretches endlessly and the sky seems to swallow the earth whole, there lived a man named Thomas Hartwell. Thomas wasn't born into farming. He chose it. At 25, fresh out of college with a degree in agricultural science, he had dreams bigger than the vast plains that surrounded his newly purchased 100-acre farm. He had studied sustainable farming, crop rotation, soil management, and weather patterns. He was armed with knowledge, passion, and an unshakable belief that hard work would yield results. The first year was promising. Thomas planted corn, soybeans, and wheat across his land. He woke before sunrise, worked until sunset, and fell asleep each night with dirt under his fingernails and hope in his heart. His crops grew strong and tall, swaying in the Nebraska breeze like a green ocean of possibility. The harvest was modest but encouraging, enough to pay his debts and reinvest in better equipment. Thomas smiled as he looked across his fields, knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be. But life, as it often does, had different plans. The second year brought drought. Not just any drought, but the kind that cracks the earth into 1,000 puzzle pieces and turns green dreams into brown nightmares. Thomas watched helplessly as his crops withered under the relentless sun. Day after day, he scanned the cloudless sky, praying for rain that never came. By harvest time, there was nothing to harvest. His carefully planned crop rotations, his scientifically calculated planting schedules, his state-of-the-art irrigation system, none of it mattered against nature's fury. Standing in his barren fields, Thomas felt the weight of failure crushing down on him like the scorching sun above. The bank was calling about loan payments. His wife, Sarah, tried to hide her worry, but he could see it in her eyes during their quiet dinners, in the way she lingered over the bills spread across their kitchen table. Their young daughter, Emma, would run through the dried stalks, unaware that her playground had become her father's graveyard of dreams. The neighbors, weathered farmers who had seen decades of unpredictable seasons, shook their heads with the wisdom of experience. "Maybe farming isn't for everyone," they whispered. "Some years take more than they give." But Thomas wasn't ready to accept defeat. He had read about drought-resistant crops, about deep-root irrigation, about farmers in Africa and Australia who had found ways to coax life from seemingly lifeless soil. Here's the first profound truth Thomas learned, and one that will change your perspective forever. When everyone tells you to quit, that's usually when you're one step away from a breakthrough. You see, most people quit just before the miracle happens. They mistake temporary setback for permanent defeat. But Thomas understood something that separates dreamers from achievers. Every closed door is just an unopened opportunity waiting for someone brave enough to try the handle again. The third year brought more drought. Thomas had borrowed money he couldn't afford to lose, invested in drought-resistant seed varieties that cost 3 times as much as regular seeds. He had installed a more sophisticated irrigation system, digging wells deeper than anyone in the county had ever dug. Yet as summer stretched on without a single meaningful rainfall, his crops failed again. The expensive seeds withered, just like the cheap ones had the year before. This time, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. Neighbors spoke openly about Thomas's foolishness. The bank manager, Mr. Henderson, called him into the office with that look that said everything before words were spoken. "Thomas," he said, his voice heavy with practiced sympathy, "sometimes the most courageous thing a man can do is know when to walk away. You've got a family to think about. There are jobs in the city, good jobs that would give Emma the stability she needs." That night, Thomas sat on his porch as Sarah put Emma to bed. The silence between him and his wife had grown heavier with each failed season. She hadn't said the words, but he knew she was thinking them. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe he was a dreamer chasing an impossible dream. Maybe it was time to admit that farming wasn't his calling after all. But as he sat there in the darkness, looking out at his barren fields, Thomas remembered something his grandfather had told him years before he died. His grandfather, who had lived through the Great Depression, who had seen dust storms that blotted out the sun, who had watched neighbors abandon their farms and flee to the cities, had said, "Son, the ground doesn't care about your timeline. It doesn't care about your debts or your worries or what other people think you should do. The ground only cares about one thing, whether you're willing to keep believing in it when it stops believing in itself." That's when Thomas understood the second life-changing truth. Your circumstances are temporary, but your character is permanent. The drought would end. Droughts always do. But if he quit now, if he walked away from his dream because the path got difficult, he would carry that surrender with him forever. He would teach his daughter that dreams are only worth pursuing when they're easy. That when life shuts a door, you should accept defeat rather than learn how doors work. The fourth year of drought tested Thomas in ways he never imagined possible. By this time, he had sold everything valuable he owned. His truck, Sarah's jewelry, even Emma's piano that she loved so much. The bank had extended his loan twice, more out of pity than confidence. Other farmers in the area had given up, selling their land to developers who turned cornfields into strip malls and subdivisions. Thomas could have done the same. In fact, he had an offer on his table that would have paid off all his debts and left him with enough money to start over somewhere else. But instead of taking the easy way out, Thomas did something that seemed crazy to everyone who knew him. He decided to go deeper, literally and figuratively. He had been reading about ancient farming techniques, about how farmers in the Middle East had grown crops in desert conditions for thousands of years. He learned about mycorrhizal fungi that help plants access water and nutrients from impossible depths. He discovered indigenous farming practices that worked with the land rather than against it. Here's where Thomas learned the third transformational truth, and this one might save your life. Innovation is born from desperation, but greatness is born from persistence. When you're backed against the wall, when you have no choice but to find a way forward, that's when your mind opens to possibilities you never saw before. Thomas didn't just plant crops that fourth year, he planted hope in soil that everyone else had declared dead. He planted heritage varieties of corn that had been grown by Native American tribes in the region for centuries before modern agriculture arrived. These weren't the high-yield hybrid varieties that everyone else used, but they were survivors, plants that had evolved to thrive in exactly these conditions. He mixed them with deep-rooted cover crops that would pull moisture from 20 feet below the surface and create a living mulch that would protect the soil from the brutal sun. But most importantly, Thomas changed his relationship with failure. Instead of seeing each withered plant as proof that he should quit, he saw it as data. Every failed crop taught him something about timing, about soil composition, about which varieties performed better under stress. He kept detailed journals, noting which sections of his field retained moisture longer, which plants showed the first signs of stress, which techniques seemed to help even when they didn't prevent complete failure. Sarah watched her husband with a mixture of admiration and fear. She saw him poring over agricultural journals late into the night, saw him taking soil samples and sending them to universities for analysis, saw him corresponding with farmers from Australia and Israel who faced similar challenges. She knew he was either on the verge of a breakthrough or a complete breakdown, and some days she couldn't tell which. The fifth year started like all the others, with hope and worry in equal measure. But this time something was different. The heritage corn varieties that Thomas had planted didn't just survive the early drought conditions. They seemed to thrive. Their deep roots found moisture that shallow-rooted plants couldn't access. The cover crops he had planted the previous year had decomposed into rich organic matter that held every precious drop of moisture like a sponge. Then, in late June, something miraculous happened. The rains came. Not just a light shower, but steady, soaking rains that fell for 3 days straight. Thomas stood in his fields, letting the water run down his face, watching his crops drink deeply from the sky they had been denied for so long. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. While other farmers in the area celebrated the end of the drought and planted their regular crops, expecting a return to normal yields, Thomas's heritage varieties and deep root system were just getting started. His crops didn't just recover from the drought, they exploded with growth. The soil that had been prepared by years of careful cover cropping, the root systems that had been strengthened by years of stress, the varieties that had been selected for resilience rather than just yield, everything came together in a symphony of abundance. By harvest time, Thomas's 100 acres produced more corn than some farms twice his size. But the real miracle wasn't just the quantity, it was the quality. The corn was richer, more nutritious, more flavorful than anything he had ever grown. Word spread quickly through the farming community, then to the agricultural universities, then to the local papers. The man who had been called foolish for refusing to quit had produced what agricultural experts called the harvest of a lifetime. But Thomas's success wasn't just measured in bushels per acre. Remember, this is a story about opening doors, about refusing to accept that closed means locked forever. The abundance of that harvest did more than pay off his debts. It fed his community in ways he never anticipated. The local food bank, which had struggled to provide fresh produce to families in need, suddenly had access to high-quality, nutrient-rich corn that could feed hundreds of people. Thomas didn't just sell his surplus crop, he donated a significant portion of it, understanding that true abundance isn't about what you keep, but what you're able to give. But the impact went even further. Other farmers, desperate to understand how Thomas had achieved such remarkable results under the same conditions that had defeated them, came to learn from his methods. Thomas didn't hoard his knowledge or keep his techniques secret. Instead, he opened his farm to anyone who wanted to learn. He shared his journals, his soil analysis, his planting schedules, his sources for heritage seeds. Here's the fourth life-changing truth that Thomas discovered. Success multiplied is success magnified. When you help others succeed, you don't diminish your own success, you amplify it. Thomas began teaching workshops on sustainable farming, consulting with other farmers who faced similar challenges, and even working with agricultural extension services to develop educational programs. Within 3 years, the farming practices that Thomas had developed through years of failure and persistence had spread throughout the region. Farmers who had been ready to give up on their land found new hope in ancient techniques combined with modern knowledge. The same drought conditions that had once threatened to destroy the agricultural community became the catalyst for innovation and renewal. Emma, now old enough to understand what her father had endured, would walk through the fields with him during harvest time. "Daddy," she asked one evening as they watched the sun set over acres of golden corn, "why didn't you give up when everyone said you should?" Thomas knelt down to meet her eyes, dirt still caked under his fingernails, satisfaction and exhaustion battling for control of his expression. "Emma," he said, "when life shuts a door in your face, most people think it means they're not supposed to go through. But doors aren't walls, they're just barriers that can be opened if you're willing to learn how they work. Sometimes you have to try different keys. Sometimes you have to push instead of pull. Sometimes you have to wait for the right moment. But if what's on the other side is worth having, then the door is worth opening." Years later, when Emma was studying agriculture at university, she would write her senior thesis on sustainable farming practices in drought-prone regions, building on the foundation her father had laid through years of supposed failure. The professor who supervised her work commented that her understanding of resilience in agricultural systems was unprecedented for an undergraduate. And Emma smiled, knowing that her real education had happened in those barren fields, watching her father refuse to accept that closed meant forever. Today, Thomas's farm has become a model for sustainable agriculture that is studied by universities around the world. The techniques he developed through years of failure have been adapted and implemented in drought-prone regions across 6 continents. The man who was once told he wasn't meant to be a farmer is now recognized as an innovator whose methods have helped feed millions of people in areas where traditional farming had failed. But perhaps the most powerful part of Thomas's story isn't the final success. It's what happened in those dark years when success seemed impossible. Because that's where the real lessons live. In those moments when the door seems permanently shut, when everyone is telling you to walk away, when even you begin to doubt whether you're on the right path. Let me share with you the 5 transformational truths that Thomas's journey reveals. Truths that can revolutionize how you approach any challenge in your life. First, failure is not the opposite of success. It's the raw material of success. Every failed crop taught Thomas something essential about his soil, his climate, his techniques. Without those failures, he would never have developed the innovations that eventually led to his breakthrough. Your failures aren't evidence that you're not meant to succeed. They're education that you can't get any other way. Second, when everyone tells you to quit, you're usually closer to breakthrough than you think. The pressure to give up always intensifies just before the miracle happens. This isn't coincidence. It's because breakthrough requires a level of commitment that most people aren't willing to maintain. The very fact that you're being told to quit might be the universe's way of testing whether you want success badly enough to push through when it gets hardest. Third, innovation requires desperation, but transformation requires persistence. Thomas didn't just get lucky with heritage corn varieties. He discovered them because he was desperate enough to look beyond conventional solutions and persistent enough to test them even when everyone thought he was crazy. Your greatest innovations will come not from your comfort zone, but from your breaking point. Fourth, true abundance isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you're able to contribute. Thomas's harvest was extraordinary, not just because of its size, but because of its impact on his community. When you succeed in a way that lifts others up, you create a legacy that extends far beyond your own achievements. And fifth, the most powerful truth of all, doors are not walls. When life shuts a door, it's not creating an impenetrable barrier. It's presenting you with a mechanism that can be opened if you're willing to learn how it works. Sometimes the key is patience, sometimes it's persistence, sometimes it's innovation, sometimes it's service to others. But there is always a way through for those who refuse to accept that closed means forever. Right now, as you listen to this story, there's probably a door in your life that seems permanently shut. Maybe it's a career goal that has faced setback after setback. Maybe it's a relationship that seems beyond repair. Maybe it's a health challenge that doctors say is incurable. Maybe it's a financial situation that appears hopeless. Maybe it's a dream that everyone tells you is unrealistic. I want you to imagine Thomas standing in his barren fields after that second year of drought, facing bankruptcy and ridicule, watching his young daughter play among the withered stalks of his failed dreams. In that moment, he had every reason to quit, every justification to walk away, every excuse to accept that farming wasn't his calling. But he didn't. He chose to see the closed door not as rejection, but as redirection. He chose to treat the obstacle not as a wall, but as a puzzle to be solved. What door in your life are you treating as a wall instead of a puzzle? What dream have you abandoned because the first few attempts didn't work? What goal have you given up on because other people convinced you it was impossible? Thomas's story isn't unique because he was special. It's powerful because he was ordinary. He wasn't born with supernatural persistence or unlimited resources or connections to powerful people. He was just a man with a dream who refused to accept that temporary setbacks were permanent defeats. The ground that everyone declared dead wasn't dead. It was waiting. Waiting for someone who understood that soil, like dreams, sometimes lies dormant not because it's lifeless, but because it's gathering strength for an explosion of growth that will surprise everyone who witnessed its barren seasons. Your season of drought isn't punishment, it's preparation. Every day you keep working toward your goal when others would quit. You're developing the deep root system that will support the abundance that's coming. Every time you choose hope over cynicism, persistence over surrender, innovation over repetition, you're creating the conditions for a harvest that will exceed even your own expectations. The door that life has shut in your face isn't meant to keep you out forever. It's meant to make you strong enough to handle what's on the other side. Because when your breakthrough comes, and it will come, it won't just change your life. Like Thomas's harvest, it will feed others, inspire communities, and create possibilities that extend far beyond anything you could have imagined when you were standing in your own barren field, wondering if you should give up. So the next time life shuts a door, don't stand there knocking helplessly. Don't walk away in defeat. Remember Thomas Hartwell. Remember the farmer's resilience. And remember that doors aren't meant to keep you out. They're meant to be opened. Sometimes with patience, sometimes with persistence, sometimes with innovation, always with hope. Open it again. It's a door. That's exactly how they work. Your breakthrough is waiting on the other side. Your community needs what you have to offer. Your dream deserves one more try, one more season, one more door opened in the face of everyone who says it can't be done. The harvest of your lifetime is coming. Keep planting. Keep believing. Keep opening doors. Because that's exactly how they work.